Test, 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 test. Yep, cool. Alright, so is this good to turn off while I'm not recording use?
Blah, 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 blah.
Okay. Well, welcome everyone. We may as well get started. I'll let everyone find a seat. So, to start off with, I'd like to do an acknowledgement of country. So, we're coming to you here today from the unceded lands of the Kaurna people. And on behalf of the Linux Australia Council, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands across Australia, New Zealand, and where we all live, learn, and meet today. I acknowledge and celebrate the inherent strengths of Aboriginal, Torres Strait Islander, and other First Nations peoples and communities, and recognise their continuing connection to the land, waters, sky, and culture. I pay my respects to their elders past, present, and emerging. Indigenous sovereignty was never ceded. This always was, always will be Aboriginal land. So, the agenda for today. Let me fix that. We've got a few things to get through. I think everyone's probably used to this by now, but there it is if you haven't remembered what it is. So, first up, we're going to go through the confirmation of the minutes from the last meeting. So, the last AGM was held a year ago, and they're on the website there. I can bring them up if you would like. So everyone who wants to can read through them. I'm not going to scroll through them all now, unless you want me to. Keep going word for word. Oh, please don't. Okay, I'll go back. In that case, I would like to move a motion that the minutes of the annual general meeting from 2024 be accepted as complete and accurate. Would someone like to second that? I saw Sarah's hand first, so I will let Sarah Germain second the motion. All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? One person abstaining. 2, 3, 4. 4 people abstaining. I hope Neil's taking note of all this. I can't see. Oh, good. Okay, well, I will just keep saying it so he can hear it later. Okay, so the motion is passed. We now will go through the office bearers' reports. So I'll start. I'm not going to read out what I wrote verbatim in that annual report. I hope everyone has had a chance to look through it, and I want to thank Sarah for compiling it. There's been a lot of events over the past year. In fact, it's been the busiest I've ever been involved with Linux Australia. We had more and more groups come to us saying, can you please help us run an event? And we didn't end up running all of those events because some of them didn't come back to us to take it on, or they decided it was too much work at the time. But it was great to see so many people wanting to come back and run events with us, and also for the benefit of the community. So I want to call out especially one new one, PurpleCon. Small event, relatively inexperienced team, but they put on a great event from everything I've heard. And they did a really good job in listening to us, understanding what was involved, and following through all of the different processes that we have to make it a smooth experience for them. And they were very excited when we told them that if they ignore the GST like we recommended, they actually did make a profit on their first go at running a conference. So that was really good news. There's been 2, I guess, other significant things in the community that I want to touch on. So first up, WordPress. I think a lot of people have seen a whole of things going on with the WordPress community recently. That's had a big flow-on effect onto the WordCamp Sydney conference that was held at the end of last year. It was right as that was all blowing up, and some of the actions that were taken were not actually things that we as Linux Australia were very happy with, especially things like them taking over the social media accounts for that conference, which normally we were supposed to be in control of under the memorandum of understanding that we have with them. So we're going to review that and see what that actually means going forward, because we need to be sure that we're going to be acting in partnership with an organisation we can trust. At the moment, I'm not sure we can trust them in that regard. The Python New Zealand community, as you know, we helped them out with a significant event that happened financially for them. That has now come to a conclusion, which is great. That individual who misappropriated the funds has now been dealt with under the law, and I'm glad to see that that chapter is behind the organisation. So thank you very much to the Linux Australia Council who worked with me on that. And I really want to thank all of the team on the Python New Zealand community as well for everything that they did throughout that, because it was a lot of work and a lot of stress on all of them. And I know that they're really benefiting from having that chapter behind them. And the last one I want to do a call out to is Python Australia. It's very much, PyCon AU is the biggest conference that is being run attendee-wise under Linux Australia at the moment. And over the past year, we had a number of members of the steering committee step back after having served for 10 or more years in that community space. I'm sure they'll still be around, but I really want to thank Katie McLaughlin, Russell Keith McGee, and Russell Jones. No, is that Richard Jones, sorry. Too many names. For their hard work over that time. I know that they'll be around in the future, but I really want to thank all of the time that they've dedicated to that to bring many conferences to the Python community. So the last thing I want to touch on is I flagged last year that we were going to have to do some constitution work at some point. That has now been forced, I guess, by some changes under the way that the ATO is looking at enforcing things. So I'm going to leave a lot of that to Russell. He's going to take you through that. But there will be a lot of stuff dealt with this year over the coming months to go through a constitutional update to make sure that we are compliant, to actually make sure we can stay a not-for-profit organisation. If we want to stay a not-for-profit, we're going to have to do this constitutional update. So it's time that we work through that as a community and get that done, because otherwise we're going to not be a not-for-profit anymore. And I don't think any of us want to see that. So thanks for my listening to that. I'm now going to call Neil up, wherever he is.
Thanks, John. Before I go any further, there's a sign-up sheet. If anybody hasn't filled it in, please let Jenny know, stick your hand up, so that we just have a record of your attendance here. So my report is in the annual report as well, so I won't go through it again. It's been a challenging but rewarding year, and I'm grateful to have been part of the council. And you know, I think we achieved quite a lot. As Joel has mentioned, we've run more conferences this year than usual. A lot of them have run under quite difficult circumstances, and the financial outcomes haven't been all that we might have hoped for. But all in all, you know, it's been a good year. We have a fair chunk of work ahead of us, and you know, I'm grateful to have been a part of it, and I look forward to continuing next year to be a part of it. And I think at this point I'll call Russell forward.
Hello everyone. Charming. Thank you, Mike. Look, I'm going to first of all do a shout out to Sarah, who's opted to leave this time round. She's been with us for 10 years and is now, I thought she was part of the furniture, and now she's disappointed me. And I'm going to go through much to say. All my report is in the annual report, of course, but I'm going to repeat part of it. The bottom line is that we made a loss of $55,000 this year. I don't know, those of you at the last AGM will remember that I said we would make a loss. And we did, and it turned out the loss was almost identically equal to what we ended up having seen across the dish to ensure that Python's New Zealand group continued to operate. That's the auditor's loss. My loss is actually higher at 72k, and I believe that's a more accurate figure. Well, I feel like every year I go through the same spiel about why the figures are different. It's spelled out in the annual report. I'm not going to repeat that at length this time because I'm surely, after this many years, I think 7 years must be boring you stupid. If we could have a look at the conference P&L now. I control this, do I? It's amazing. It's up high. That's the. Anyway, while that's happening, so what you'll see at the bottom of the conferences here, you can see the top. As usual, we've got magnification problems, but if you look at the bottom, you'll see something unusual in that there's negative figures. And what those negative figures mean is that some of our conferences made a loss. They made a loss mostly because of unexpected difficulties with sponsorship. Well, they weren't quite unexpected. We did warn them that was going to happen, but you have to be bitten before you really understand the realities of it. The $18,000 profit due there is, in fact, this conference. So everything open continued to, as it, for last Linux Australia or everything open is the big hauler normally. It's now PyCon. Is another one. But the rest of them didn't do so well. Now, the next thing is Joel said it's a very busy year, and you only see 4 conferences or 5 conferences down there. And that's because 4 of them happened. 3 of them happened after the end of this year, but after the end of our financial year. And one of the noticeable absentees is PyCon. And that's not because there wasn't a PyCon, that's because it happened late in the year. Joel mentioned PurpleCon, that's another one that's missing. Another one is an unusual experiment of ours, which really was an experiment and has caused a suitable amount of angst. We were predicting 100,000 loss at one point. That didn't eventuate. As usual, the conference organisers never cease to amaze me. And we've had this issue before with other conferences. That they look like they're going to do horribly. PyCon looked like it was going to make a loss. In actual fact, they will probably break even, and that conference is Drupal Singapore. So we have hosted another conference outside Australia. The prediction was that they don't have a conference outside. Linux Australia could possibly bring open source to help bring open source to Asia, so we thought it was worth a bet, and it broke even. So I think the bet, that's our remit, to bring open source to everyone, and like it worked out, I think. All right. Sorry, I shouldn't vary the length of this thing. The difference between the auditor's statement, the auditor's profit, which is on the far right column there, and my profit is, you see, about 20,000, probably a bit less, 17,000. The difference is those conferences that were held later in the year. They've booked a lot of sponsorship, but haven't incurred all their expenses that we expected to occur. So we've received a lot of money. We expect to pay out a lot of money, a lot more. The auditor, of course, counts that because he says, well, you've got the income in this year. But as far as I'm concerned, those profits will be booked when those conferences finalise next year. So all we include is the blue conferences there, and they are the ones that finalise this year. And those numbers represent the activity of the conference over their entire run, which spanned several years, not just what happened this year. So I apologise, it is a complex spreadsheet, but I think the 72,000 does truly represent the results of the conferences in blue, and excludes the conferences that have not completed. All right, now I'm not going to show you, well, maybe Joel could show you the budget, but there's nothing much to see in the budget. The budget remains the same every year because our fixed costs like insurance, the accountant, the audit cost us $5,500, the whole pile of things cost us roughly the same. Well, actually the little diagram there is probably not as bad as any. Cost us the same amount every year. It never changes. Well, not goes up by inflation. LA's loss, where we dump everything else in, turned out to be about what we bailed out NZ Pug with. And the reason for that is that we made a fair amount of interest. Last year I mentioned that interest rates are high, so we put it in the longest term deposit I could find, and it paid out reasonably. We'll get another payout. Went for 2 years, so we'll get a similar payout this year in interest before the interest rates drop on it again to match the economy. Nonetheless, our overheads are still higher than the 6% we allow for. This is just funny money, but the conferences tend to want to keep their money. And there's a fair amount of pressure coming in that direction. We argue that, look, we need the profit to do what we did this year and survive when conferences make large losses or things go wrong. It's self-insurance. And their argument is we'd like to spend it on ourselves. Our argument is we give away grants. It goes back and forward. The reality is PyCon came to us when they were going to look like they were going to make a loss, and they were very concerned, and they said, look, there's things we think we should do this conference to keep our attendees. It's going to cost us another $10,000. That's probably going to be another $10,000 off our bottom line. Our response is always, yes, all right, we think that's a good argument. Go ahead, spend the money, we'll wear the loss. But nonetheless, in good years, they see us keeping the money, and it's a difficult conversation. One way to offset that is to say, look, our overheads are 10% of which is probably closer to what it should be. The reality is that Linux Australia wouldn't exist if Linux Conference Australia and Now Everything Open didn't fund Linux Australia in the beginning for years and years and years. All right, looking forward. Now, as I said, I am continually amazed by the management of our conferences, and these are inexperienced people, they're not business people, and yet they pull irons out of the fire and they turn bad incomes into good. And they now, I think all of them have been bitten by the lack of sponsorship, so that means their hand has been burnt in the fire, and I have every confidence that they will correct for the lower sponsorship we're seeing. I don't think that's an issue, so these losses we see this year probably will not continue. But currently, as I said in my report, although we have a conference that I've attended commercial conferences, they are nothing compared to the talks we get here, technically. We have volunteers, lots of volunteers running around, no trouble getting volunteers, no trouble funding, no trouble finding venues, no trouble finding speakers, but we can't find anyone to run it. The reality is that the executive of Linux Australia has run the last 4 Everything Open conferences, and I think I said in previous years it's not sustainable, and I think we've come to the end of that trot. And we don't have anyone putting their hand up. So it's possible as a treasurer, we will lose the $18,000 that going forward. unless people do put up their hand. And the third and final thing is that we got a surprise letter from the ATO that said we are instituting a new thing called a not-for-profit self-assessment, which is good. You've got to tell them that you're worthy of being a not-for-profit, which was I thought an interesting. I didn't understand, to be honest, because they're asking you to certify that you're a good not-for-profit. And of course, what are we going to say? Of course, we're a good not-for-profit. In actual fact, it looks to be pulling the ATO's definition of not-for-profit in alignment with the Charities and Not-for-Profit Commission. We have this thing called the Charities and Not-Profit Commission, and notice there is the word not-for-profit in there, and we have the ATO, and the ATO, I think, is farming off their definition of what a not-for-profit is to the people who monitor charities and not-for-profits, and they're just going to handle, okay, they'll say whether you're a not-for-profit or not. And if you're a not-for-profit, you don't get to pay tax. Otherwise, you get to pay 25% tax on your earnings. So we went through and he answered the questions, and one of the answers to the questions are an interesting question, which has been, I've tripped over many times because I don't like it, is what happens to your assets if you wind up? And the answer is our Constitution says that the executive could just take it home and buy a new house. That's what our Constitution currently says, which I found extraordinary given it's the New South Wales model constitution that we adopted, and when I saw there was no disposal of assets clause in it, I was shocked, actually. Anyway, apparently now the ATO has decided that this is just not acceptable and we must have such a clause, and we will not be classified as a not-for-profit unless we have such a clause. Now, we've had two AGMs, two elections on changing the Constitution. They did two things. They introduced that clause and they introduced an objects clause. And the objects clause is to satisfy the ACNC because they will not accept it unless you have objects. So that's all those changes did. They've been rejected twice because we're still not in compliance, and now we're being told we will get taxed at 25% if you're not compliant. So given that course of events, and I've tried to modify the existing constitution, we're going to try a different route and just adopt the New South Wales model constitution again. Because we did that before and it was accepted. So we're going to try it again. So I've just copied the New South Wales model constitution verbatim. Turns out they've reordered it, changed all the words, making a diff near bloody impossible. So we've gone through it and compared the meanings of all the clauses, and the couple of clauses that we care about, like electronic records and free membership, right, they don't anticipate free membership and a few other things. We've pulled across from the other one, we've added the objects, we've added the disposal of assets clause, and so we have the new model constitution with a couple of changes that were carried across from the other constitution, and that is now up on GitHub as a proposed PR for our constitution. It was put there last night. We propose to let everyone comment on it, read it. It's a PR. You can make your comments on, make your suggestions. Sometime, definitely before June 30th, because that's the ATO implied deadline, we will call a special general meeting and ask for your vote to accept the new constitution. Why is the Treasurer saying this? Because the Treasurer cares deeply about the 25%. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep, I'll...
Joe, actually, there was a question. The 25%, is that on revenue or on profit?
Profit.
Right, okay.
So we currently have, I think, about $800,000 in the bank. If we had have paid that, and we've lost, 55. In fact, we could have lost a lot more. We could have lost 150, 200 this year. Things have just tilted the wrong way slightly. It's been a big year, right? I ran out of bank accounts. I ran out of Stripe accounts. It's been one of those years. And it's been a nervous year. We would have 25% less in the bank now if we had always been paid tax. It has other effects too. Some of our Stripe accounts, we are not counted as a not-for-profit. Why? Because you have to go through this long process. If you're registered with Australian Charities, you get an automatic discount. The process disappears because they just say, Australian government's evaluated you through this long process, you're counted as a charity, therefore you're worthy of the not-for-profit discount. Not a charity discount, just the not. It automates a whole pile of things. They use the Australian Charities Commission as a certifier that you are actually not there to make a money. You're there to do good in the community. It extends to payroll tax. We don't have employees, but if we ever got employees, we wouldn't have to pay payroll tax. Maybe our employees a solution to the problem we have with everything open. Maybe that's something we might choose to do in the future. I don't know, but we couldn't do it unless we are in fact accepted as a charity, which we're not at the moment. Any other questions, I guess? Yeah, sorry.
Of the 8 or so, what category of non-for-profit seems possible, appropriate?
We'd go for the lowest. Oh, well, actually, interestingly, and we thought we didn't fit into any category. But it turns out we're a scientific institution. You can read the justification for that on the charity's website, and there are lots of words in the PR. There's a series of 4 commits that evolve it from the actual raw New South Wales Constitution, which is imported verbatim, and then to a series of modifications that get it to the form we need it. And each of them has a long comment in front of it saying why I made that change. So I've forgotten where I was up to, sorry. And those comments explain why we've taken each step, including the adoption of objects. Any other questions?
Yeah, just got a quick question. What I heard you say earlier, you said that if everything open didn't run next year, that you would make an $80,000 loss. How could that happen if you don't run an event?
No, we wouldn't make. We got $18,000 profit, which is what it made this year, right? Yeah. It ranges between that and 40,000 or something or other. But we've had that every year for, 27 years or something. That's why Linux Australia is funding open source conferences now in the Asia Pacific. That's because we squirrel that money away and it's built up, and suddenly we're finding ourselves running 8 conferences in a year, which, you've got to pay $100,000 venue deposit. 8 conferences, that's 800,000. That's most of our assets out the door, and making a bet that these conferences will work. It's great. We get to attend lots of open source conferences because of Linux Australia. It's because of that money.
Thank you. We will now, I did have questions, but we just had questions. Any other questions? One from Josh. Should I get Russell back?
Thank you very much. Thank you for the. Was this on? Yep. Thank you for the reports. They were very well put together. I really appreciate the full PDF. So I got a few questions, but I'll try and bundle it up, and feel free to make a short response, and we can discuss it more later. But with the in specific regards to branching out into Singapore, what did we provide to it was Drupal Singapore? Was it banks, insurance, or other? And would we extend that to other conferences interested in Singapore? And further, would we consider other countries in the APAC region?
Yeah, so with that one, it was bank accounts, insurance, as you mentioned. They came to us with a proposal to run the event in Singapore as the starting point. So for those who don't know, DrupalCon is the premier Drupal conference worldwide. So there's one in America, there's one in Europe, and what they're looking at trying to do is establish one within the Asia Pacific region. So they've had one, I think, event previously. This was their attempt to properly start that up, and it's born out of the Drupal South committee. They've actually, some members there have stepped up to try to work with the Drupal Association to do that. So Linux Australia actually has signed an agreement with the Drupal Association for that event to help support it. I think that's going to be an interesting one in particular, whether we keep going with that particular agreement or not. It's quite obvious from the agreement in the way it's written at the moment is that it's written for an event company to take on. That's how it's run in Europe, and they essentially take on all the risk. And I'm not prepared for Linux Australia to take on all the risk and the Drupal Association to take on no risk, and us have to pay the Drupal Association money if the conference makes a loss and stuff like that. So we made sure that it was modified for this first one, that we didn't have any of that. If we go ahead with it, I'll be making sure that that type of thing is not in there, because I'm not prepared for us to just prop up the Drupal Association through that type of funding agreement. Overall, I think going to other countries, I know that that team is looking to try to go to other countries. They're not sure exactly which one yet. They've got a couple of ideas. They haven't, I guess, gone through all the motions of looking at all the implications of what that is. We're not sure if Linux Australia can definitely do that and keep going with all of the countries. A challenge that we will have is tax implications. So another thing that we had with Singapore, it was all right because of the amount of revenue that we were going to have and stuff like that. It didn't cross any barriers. An interesting thing that we had, though, at a completely different conference was someone bought a ticket from France, and we have now been contacted by Stripe to say that we have to now make tax reports to France. We're still trying to work out what we do with that one. So we don't, the advice basically has been now you cannot buy sell tickets to people overseas through that platform. So we're going to have to work out a few things there, because we want obviously to have international speakers and guests and whatever come, but we don't want to have to register for tax with every single country in the world and have to deal with that, because we just can't sustain that. So yeah, I think there's a lot of questions to go through there, and Russell's spent a lot of time looking at them, but we'll assess each one as it comes up and go through it. One other down the front.
Thank you for all the work, by the way, that you guys do as a volunteer. My name is Alexa Pendaste. I'm president of Linux Victoria, a subcommittee of Linux Australia. I've also been very active in the Drupal community, and at some point I was in a working group at Drupal Association as well. So I understand that this has been a case that has been considered, and it's really good to see Australia is playing a leading role in the tech community in South or Asia Pacific. So I'm thinking, when you think about Asia Pacific, is this a strategic is there a strategic point for Linux Australia to consider that, or is there, you know what I mean? Like, is Linux Australia also considering to have an impact in the region, or are we thinking of putting that in our strategy, or just be going case by case at the moment?
I guess we've always done stuff across Australia and New Zealand. We've actually supported some other events around other countries as well in the region, and supported people getting from those countries to our events and stuff like that. I don't think I'm going to stand up here and say by myself one way or the other whether we do strategically go that way or not. The things I just mentioned about all the financial constraints and implication that has for us, we are still a volunteer organisation, and I'm concerned that doing more and more in more countries will impact how much workload each of us has to complete, and most of that ends up falling, unfortunately, on whoever the treasurer is, because most of it is financial related. So I think we can certainly look at doing more things in more places, but we are still focused on Australia predominantly. We've run the event across, LCA has been in New Zealand before, we're supporting Python New Zealand and so on. But I think there's still opportunities to partner with similar organisations in other areas to achieve that goal as well. So ultimately, I think it's a decision for the council and how we achieve that, but there's nothing specifically planned around that at the moment. Yeah.
So what I'm trying to understand as a subcommittee is because I understand at the moment it's happening in a case-by-case basis. However, if we see potential opportunities to do this more in the organization spectrum, then maybe subcommittees can also consider exploring those opportunities and bringing them up. So maybe like Linux user groups can also find potential partnerships. So that's why I was wondering, is this has been just one case and for financial reasons, or supporting a Drupal community in Australia we did that? Or maybe if there is something that we like to do, we can put more thoughts in that and enable other committees as well, subcommittees to think.
We always say to our subcommittees, feel free to bring any ideas to us and we'll discuss them with them and go from there. Because ultimately it comes down to what that particular idea is as to what, I guess, work is involved and how well that's going to go for Linux Australia and the subcommittee. So yeah, we go through them all on a case-by-case basis.
Okay, so we can actively think about exploring Asia Pacific opportunities.
I guess so. Bring it through to us and we'll see what it is. Yeah.
Thanks.
Kind of a little bit on that, I guess, as well, talking about the viability of everything open. There's no committee for a conference for next year or for the following year. Now, as well as I know that revenue from sponsorship has dropped off over quite a number of years, there's quite a trend. But my understanding is that there is an issue with the fact that LCA was a recognised name and brand. Now, a lot of people know that I always had issues with it being an international conference and having an Australian-based name. But that being said, that's different things that I've heard has been that sponsors know LCA. They know what that conference is, and then they not necessarily want to, they don't see the connection necessarily with everything open. Is there some way that things can be turned or twisted in a way that it's still everything open? Because I totally believe, especially after listening to Sarah this afternoon, in the viability of that name. And always have thought that's a great name for this event because it's what it is. But somehow making it so that the LCA or the Linux Australia name is so closely bonded with it that it comes back to being that recognisable icon that our sponsors know and will immediately start putting their hands in the pockets. What we need is to have situations where make it as easy as possible for people to give us money, which makes it easy then for somebody to actually step up and run an event. I guess, is there any way that we can work something like that out? I guess is my question.
Yeah, so I guess I'll address two parts. On the sponsorship side, I don't agree with that on the fact that sponsors don't see the alignment. The ones we've spoke to all understand, and we spoke to them all about it and so on, and that they understood it. The challenge has actually been that you might notice IBM hasn't sponsored. That's because IBM essentially isn't operating in the same way anymore in Australia for that particular area, and therefore they stepped away from the sponsorship after that amount of time. It wasn't to do with the conference name change. We've had a lot of sponsors over the years that have been up at that level, and the companies have stopped essentially existing in that same space, and so they move on and the conference keeps going. We've managed to reach out to new sponsors and so on. We've, across every single conference this year, everyone that's gone back to their sponsors that they've had recurring have all had them say, a number of them say, no, we'll not keep going this year because we can't afford it or we don't have budgets. We've also had several over the last couple of years who had signed up and then at the last 2 weeks pulled out. So that's the challenges that we've had with sponsorship. And I think we'll keep going through that a bit over the next 12 months. But I think that now that we know the environment that we're in and it's at that point across every single event, we can target them in different ways and also work, I guess, across all of the conferences in certain ways to do different sponsorship packages and so on to help all of the events, not just one of them. On LCA specifically, yep. I think Andrew wrote in an email recently, Andrew Denellan, that he'd like to see something with LCA back again as part of Everything Open. That was actually one of the ideas that we had, and we didn't do it for the first year. That was very much on purpose. What my aim was to actually change the Linux kernel mini-conf into LCA as part of Everything Open. That was the intent. It hasn't been done yet because we haven't had enough people really step up to help us bring that back to a bigger event. I've now been running this in some capacity since 2018 and I can't do it another year. So that's the reality of it. As it turns out, we have Carlos from the OpenSI Institute from University of Canberra. I'm going to put them on the spot because they have talked to us about it and they would like to bring it to Canberra next year, but we need a team of people in Canberra to do it. So I'm trying to talk to people in Canberra to work that out. So there is hope for it to be run next year, and I think it will be, but we don't have anything to announce yet, and I've probably said more than I should have on some of that, but that's the reality of it. And yeah, we will keep looking at ways to change things up and adjust it and whatever to bring it to more people and so on. But we are trying to play with different parts of the format and whatever to find the right way to keep it going, because the change of the name wasn't just that. It was things like we wanted to make sure that all of the speakers got tickets, because that was one of the common complaints for the mini-confs, and we were actually seeing time and time again over the past from 18, 19, 20, those 2 years we ran mini-confs, and then online as well in 21 and 2. We had less and less submissions to the mini-confs, and we actually called off one mini-conf because there wasn't enough submissions, and others we finished early because there just weren't enough submissions to justify having it run the whole full day because we couldn't sustain it. So as much as the mini-confs were loved, and I still think they're a good idea, we need to find a way to make sure that they are sustainable, and I want to make them more integrated, I guess, to give people a ticket to the conference and stuff like that, so that we can actually have them come to the conference, experience it and enjoy it more, but still give them that support as a sort of smaller event that the mini-confs helped foster the ideas through. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff we can do, and happy for ideas to be put out there and we can go through them all. Yeah.
Thank you first for taking it on for so long, because we do we understand it. We've been there. It's 10 years since we ran it, and it's a big effort. So for you and the team to run it for so long, thank you for your support of the community.
And thanks to Sarah as well, because she's been
I mean, your
a big
team,
part of it.
the whole group, right? That's really important. We went, I've been involved the conference for many years, but in 2015 I took on the sponsorship aspect. I think it's the biggest sponsorship income we ever had for a conference, because I bent a lot of arms, and I've done it every year since. It's something I do when I'm on the road, when I'm at events. And I'm wondering, do we need a group within Linux Australia focused on this broadly across all of the events and finding ways to generate that pool of money, looking at new sponsors, looking at new options? Because within the open source community, things have pivoted and changed quite a lot. As you say, a lot of those big sponsors have gone away. They've gone away not just at this event, they've gone away at all the other events. The sponsorship bucket has changed. And sometimes it's nice to have a lot of new names up there and engage a lot more companies and engage their staff to come along and engage them to be more involved with the conference. And we've had that before, and actually being able to get back to the point where we're able to run a couple of mini-confs encourages some additional sponsors. Like we had Western Digital one year because they're really excited because we're the Open ISA mini-conf. ARM got interested in particular with the open hardware things we've been doing in the past, and they've had a lot of value out of the event. They're a strong supporter. So in a way, it's an ask for all of you. Who else can we shoulder tap? Who else can we engage? And how can we start building a new pool of organizations, not just for this, but for everything else on this Australia Helps auspice?
Yeah. Building a pool of organizations is certainly something we need to do. And it's not just for sponsorship, but also to have a group to contact to let them know about all the events and so on as well. So whether we get sponsorship or not, just letting them know that the event's on so that they can promote that internally. And even if they sent one person, that's still a good starting point to get them in understanding the event and then go from there. So we have talked about, I know I've been in discussions with various people over the years about doing some sort of central thing. I think we could set up a working group and go through some of that. Yep, happy to get you involved. And I know some of the other conferences have also expressed some interest in that. I think we will be talking to all the different conferences as the subcommittees start up for this year. So we'll go through all that with them. What form it'll take and whatever, I don't know. But yeah, I'll let you know when we get something like that set up and put it out there.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to realise that I'm sitting here. I forgot mention one thing in my report. My apologies. And that is we pay grants out of profits. So there is one big change in the budget this year. We made a loss. Therefore, we will not be paying out the usual grants this year. I'm sorry for the admission. Thank you.
Okay. I was interested last year to see the contributor ticket, and if memory serves, there were only 2 people that actually took that up, and I'm wondering, perhaps a broader question, but I support Linux Australia and the various conferences that we have, trying to keep especially student tickets low, and I don't want to ever sort of have the situation when we charge the same amount as some of the commercial and very expensive conferences. But I guess I'm interested to know, maybe as a question on notice for the Treasurer, what's the sort of current thinking and future thinking on how the community can also help things like Everything Open survive into the future, like from the ticket price perspective alone.
Yeah, this is going to sound like a cop-out, but I don't actually set the budgets for the conferences, right? That's done by the conference treasurers. I try to give them as much freedom as possible beyond don't make a loss. That I don't know the answer to your question. I know that we valiantly try to keep the student prices in particular down as much as we can. And the hobbyist I don't think has changed. I think the professional's gone up slightly. I don't have an easy answer for your question. Probably because I'm not the treasurer for this conference is part of it, possibly because it's a very difficult question to answer.
One thing to realise, you've got your student, hobbyist, professional, and then all the special categories. Up until about Perth, generally with the old LCAs, there was almost a balance between professional and hobbyist. As of Perth, as of Canberra, Perth, Auckland, and a few after, professional went through the roof. At one point, it was like 70+% of the tickets were professional. There was a real big change, and I believe then it's dropped off again. There's been some trending. And it was really interesting to see because that really did change the revenue model for the event. It meant you had quite a lot more money in your back pocket as the money came in. And that really does help offset some of the losses from sponsorship. I haven't seen the more recent events, but we did provide on when we were doing Ghost for subsequent events some trending we captured over the years. We basically went through every year's ticket sales and modeled everything out. And it was really interesting to see the way it was trending. It was kind of plateauing at that point, 68, 69% professional. And then it's kind of weaned, I believe it's weaned off a bit since then. And that really does you a favour because it supports the rest of the event. But sponsorship, having that in your back pocket makes a massive difference, particularly if you get a sponsor to sign early, because you've got that money then to pay the bills and give you that consistency through running the event. But everyone's become a lot more price sensitive to the ticket price. And when it's only a 3-day event, you can't charge what you would for a 5-day event.
Okay. In the interest of moving along, I might go to the motions. Because I'd like to move the motions that we have to do for the AGM. So the first motion I have is by Russell Stewart that the auditor's report is a true statement of the financial accounts. Would someone like to second that? I saw Stephen Ellis first, so I'll record that. All those in favour? All those against? Anyone abstaining? 1. Okay. Motion passed. Next is a motion by myself that the President's report is correct. Anyone like to second that? I saw Josh first. So is Josh seconded. All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? David, okay. 1 motion passed. A motion by Neil that the Secretary's report is correct. Would someone like to second that? I saw Jonathan first. Jonathan Moiety first. So all those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? 1 again. Motion passed. A motion by Russell Stewart that the Treasurer's report is correct. Who would like to second? Cherie. All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? One again. Good. Motion passed. And finally, I'd like to move a motion that the actions of Council during 2024 are endorsed by the membership. Is there someone to second? I think I saw you and I can't see. Are you Ian? Sorry. All those in favour? Anyone against? Anyone abstaining? 1, 2, 3, 3 I think I count. Motion passed. Thank you for that part. Any other business? I don't think we had anything sent in, Neil, did we? No. So we've had a lot of questions. Anything from the floor now? Yes, Clinton.
I would just like to say that the conversations that have been started here, we don't have to wait 12 months to get them going. We've got the mailing list. So while you're energised, get onto the mailing list and talk about your ideas there.
I just wanted to shout out a special thank you to Sarah for all her time on the council. I believe by a decent margin she is the longest serving council member, and in addition, quite likely by a decent margin, the most prolific organiser of conferences for LA. So thank you very much for all your hard work.
G'day. When I picked up my badge this morning, Sarah said, "Oh, Paul, making trouble as usual," and I felt I got that kind of reception when I asked about videos on the Linux Australia list. So I don't mean to make trouble here. I'm certainly interested in talking to Linux Australia about a bid for 2026 in Canberra, but I kind of want to know that I kind of want to say from the outset that I'm not aiming to make trouble by saying that, and I know in the past I've raised issues about that, so I kind of want that on the record.
I can assure you that I didn't mean anything by my response to the mailing list on the videos. It was purely that I had a lot of things to get done and I'm still working on. So yeah, the videos will be done. Yeah. And Sarah, yeah.
I just wanted to add to the record, that was no slight against Paul. It was more just a passing joke, and I apologise for that. And it had nothing to do with the videos whatsoever. Thanks.
Oh, yeah.
By the time next year's AGMs come around, we're all going to have forgotten most of what happened here. So I'd like to move a motion that the minutes of this meeting can be approved at the first council meeting, rather than waiting all the way till next year when everyone's forgotten it.
We actually have to do this as part
anyway?
of...
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yeah, we can definitely post them, but the actual motion has to be done at the AGM. Probably the SGM in that case, but yeah.
Have a logistical question about the SGM. Feel free to just guard me because you want to go have dinner. But do we have to have a minimum number of members present to make a constitutional change? And I believe there's also a minimum number of positive votes, 2/3 something, but I can't recall. Do you know that?
There are, and I don't remember them off the top of my head, and I'm not going to try to fight them now. But yeah, we will look through all that and get it all prepared and sent through. So Russell wanted to bring it up today. I've actually said, do we want to or get the page written up first? But I'm happy to have gone through it today. But yeah, there will be a page coming that outlines again why we're doing it, so that not just the people here and whoever's watching online now or later can see, so that we can explain it all and go through the explanation of why we're trying to do this, because there are good reasons for it. From what we read through, yes, we think so. So yeah, we'll put all that on the page though once we have it, because we want to make sure it's written up right. I'll invite Julian up quickly.
And since I have the stats, I have just filled in the last couple of years of council elections, and sorry, this is thing. Yeah. I don't think it needs to. Let me just brighten it. And yes, depending on how you count, Sarah and Russell are definitely the two longest serving council members, with Russell being clearly equal lead as of this year. So just because I had the stats, because we did them a couple of years ago. So I was acting as returning officer again for the council election, I think 3rd year running. I think Kathy was the one before me, so that might be right. Essentially, everything, we have a well dialed in system at this point. It works as the system works, and that's probably the only two things of note are the way, particularly for the OCM where this matters, the way second preferences and such work mean that it is not, the election is not held in the sort of Senate count style system that Australians might assume for an OCM, for the OCM position to run as. And there's one other note I had in here. Yes, and we didn't have this situation this year, but it is not uncommon for someone to stand as, for example, both secretary and an ordinary committee member, and if they are elected as a secretary, they are not then eliminated by the system for those lower systems, so we would actually have a hand count. That didn't apply this year, but we did have the case where the last OCM position, both candidates received the same first count votes, so it was down to second count. If it was done a different system, it may have had a different result. So I think that's the only real elements of note. Were there any questions on that? You've got the results up. Good. I can scroll to my own notes somewhere. So once again, Joel returns as president. That was uncontested. Jennifer as VP, which was a contested election. Neil as secretary, again contested. Russell, once again, continuing his amazing work. And for ordinary council members, we have Alana, Jonathan, and Lily. Anything else? Excellent.
Thank you very much, Julian. And I do realise that I'm missing a photo. I didn't have one of Lily, so once I have one, I'll put it up. I think we've had ample questions now, so I'm going to say maybe not. But yeah, thank you very much for coming along to the AGM. I'll officially close it there. I want to say one more thank you to Sarah, because you've been a big help to me. So yeah, thanks everyone.
Well handled. I must admit, I was not expecting the questions to take the path that they did.
No, I sort of did, but
I was expecting more. So yes, well done.
oh, okay, thank you.
You've got, and it's back to the original. So
All right, yeah, that's
Well done,
I went and did that 2 or 3 years ago. Whenever we did the talk, I built this, and it's like I've got the numbers. Let me just dump in 3 years of data.